All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lily's Show and Tell series. Lily stands for Lifelong Information Literacy, and we're a group of librarians and information professionals who work to promote lifelong information literacy. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items. First, this session is being recorded, and the recording will be sent out at the end of the week. You can look for it on the Lily webpage. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. I will keep an eye on the chat and note down any questions for our speakers. And finally, if you want to learn more about Lily or presenting your own show and tell, I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and you can feel free to email me anytime. I'm Cassandra Nieves. I am the Lily web manager. And now on to our speakers. We have Amanda Dinscore, an associate librarian at Cal Poly Humboldt University Library, and Debbie Gonzalez, an assistant professor at Cal Poly Humboldt Department of Social Work. Take it away.
All right, thanks everyone for being here today. Our presentation is entitled A Library and Social Work Collaboration to Support Research-Informed Practice. Just make sure. Oh, okay. So Debbie, I'm going to let Debbie introduce herself first.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Debbie Gonzalez. I've been with Cal Poly Humboldt Social Work Department for about 15 years, but in 2022, I was hired in my tenure track faculty member. I also have some editorial experience with an international open access social work journal, the Journal of Comparative Social Work. I was a guest editor for in the year of 2021 and 2022. Thank you for coming.
So my name is Amanda Dinscore. I'm the College of Professional Studies librarian at Cal Poly Humboldt. I was a librarian actually at Fresno State University for about 15 years prior to starting work here at Humboldt last fall. So Debbie and I met actually at a new faculty orientation, and we really hit it off and talked a lot about social work, some of the overlaps and intersections between social work and librarianship, and had some really great conversations and kind of led to the project that we're going to talk about today. So just so you know why you're here, and hopefully so you'll want to stick through for the entire presentation, we're going to talk about a project that we developed with a class of Debbie's students last spring. We developed it over the fall, and then we implemented it in the spring, and we're planning to continue doing this this coming spring and also in the future as well. So our goal was really to prepare graduating BSW students, Bachelor of Social Work students, to engage in research-informed practice. The class was a group of students who were soon to graduate, so we thought that this was really important. Some of the components of the project included a three-part workshop series, and in those workshops, we covered topics such as information privilege, scholarly publishing, open access, and seeking authority outside of the scholarly literature. We also engaged students in an open pedagogy assignment where they shared the work that they completed in the workshops in an online repository that included both scholarly and non-scholarly sources, and we'll share that with you a little bit later. We also conducted pre and post surveys prior and after the workshops to assess student knowledge before and then also get feedback on what they had learned. So today we're going to talk about the background for this project, some of the discussions that we had, some of the things that influenced the content that we covered with the students, our instructional approach, and also assessment, and we'll talk about the surveys and next steps for this project. So first, before we get started, we wanted to tell you a little bit about where we live and work. We're actually, if you look at the map there on the right side of the screen, that's the map of all the California state universities in California. We are up at the very tippy top on the far left in Humboldt County. So we're at Cal Poly Humboldt. It's about 200 miles north of San Francisco and about 50 miles from the Oregon border. So we're very nearly in Oregon. The county is really small. We have about 137,000 people. It's rural, it's coastal, it's incredibly beautiful here. As you can see from both Debbie and I, we have our Zoom backgrounds. It's a little taste of what it looks like here. It's gorgeous. But it is quite remote and isolated from the rest of California. So there are limited services and resources to support its population, which is why our social work program is so important here.
And so our university is located on the present and historical ancestral homelands of unceded territory of the Wiyot tribe. And we did just undergo a name change. So we were formerly known as Humboldt State University, and this new designation of Cal Poly distinguishes us. We're the third Cal Poly system in the California State University system. And with this name change came a large financial investment, along with a projected increase with enrollment. So we anticipate that within the next 3 years, our enrollment will increase by 50%, and within the next 7, 100%. Currently, we do see a growth in programs here at Cal Poly Humboldt, but we are still currently small university. In 2023, we had 5,976 students enrolled. 40% of our students are first generation students. Cal Poly Humboldt is also an HSI, so we're a Hispanic serving institution. I am really proud to be a member of the Cal Poly Humboldt community and proud to be a member of the social work faculty. Our social work program offers both undergraduate and master's level degrees. We offer those degrees both on our campus and as a fully online program through the state of California. Our emphasis in our program, in our social work program, we do have an indigenous and rural focus, and we do have a decolonizing approach. We teach our students the importance of building relationships within community and the importance of being respectful to the diverse cultural differences within a community.
And also the Cal Poly Humboldt Library is a small library. We have about 10 full-time tenure track faculty librarians, but we are very involved in promoting and supporting OER, student publishing, open pedagogy, and other creative activities. And we have one designated librarian for each of the 3 colleges at the university.
So Amanda went over a little bit about our background. She and I met in the new faculty cohort last academic year. In this new faculty cohort met bi-monthly. So 2 times a month, we would get together to support relationship building among the new faculty and also to be successful along the tenure track process. And so within these meetings, Amanda and I quickly became friends and discovered that connection, as she mentioned, of librarianship and social work. And so we decided to begin to meet to see if we could collaborate on a project. And it was in these meetings that we discovered the similarities with the ACRL framework and my basis with the social work educational competency standards. And then also within these discussions, we discovered our similarities with professional ethics and values. And so that's the background of how this project came to be.
So as some of you may know, if you are librarians who work with social work programs, there's been a lot of work that's been done in kind of looking at and exploring the intersections between the companion document to the ACRL framework and some of the standards and competencies, as well as ethics and values of the social work profession. But for the purposes of our project, we really wanted to focus on competency 4 of the Council on Social Work Education's Educational Policy and Accreditation Standards. That's a bit of a mouthful. But these standards are really important, and they are used for accreditation processes for the bachelor's and master's level social work programs, including at Cal Poly Humboldt. So this really served as the backbone, really, of our entire project. So I don't certainly don't want to read this entire competency to you, but I will give you some time to look through it. But basically, competency 4 is titled "Engage," that it's important for social workers to be able to engage in practice-informed research and research-informed practice upon graduation. So if you want to skim through that, feel free, but in summary, those last 2 lines, the important aspects of this is that social workers are able to apply research findings to improve, inform and improve practice, policy, and programs, and be able to identify ethical, culturally informed, anti-racist, and anti-oppressive strategies that address inherent biases for use in quantitative and qualitative research methods to advance the purposes of social work. And for those of you who are librarians, as you read through this, think about some of the frames, like authority is constructed and contextual, and information has value, and research is inquiry, and then also, of course, scholarship is conversation. We found that there were clear overlap, clear intersections here with this competency and the framework. So when we discussed this competency, we realized that library instruction efforts, both for social work and for most other disciplines, are usually tailored to the resources students have access to as students, but they may not provide them with the skills they need to conduct research as practitioners. So our driving question for the entire project was, how can we address the disconnect between what's expected of social work practitioners in competency 4 and what is possible in terms of access?
And I think we also wanted to highlight that historically there is a gap between the field of social work and the researchers and the practitioners, the frontline workers. Also, one of our focuses is that in social work, we want to highlight the importance of these competencies are not just for students. They are competencies that are a foundation of practice, so that we hope when students graduate that they take these competencies as important, building in their foundation of practice.
And we did want to give a shout out to the work of Kimberly Pendle. She's the social work and social sciences librarian at Portland State University. And her work, several of her articles, and she has a really great LibGuide and open social work website that really got us thinking about this topic in more depth and really inspired us early on. So I do have a works cited list at the very end of the presentation that you can take a look at, but I would encourage you, if you are interested in pursuing this further, that she has done amazing work on this topic.
So access really is important. Another aspect in social work education, obviously, and I think probably with librarians, we want our education to support lifelong learners, and to show students that research is not just used to complete papers, but that research is really used to inform practice. In social work, social workers will use research to understand problems. And this isn't particularly important to identify effective interventions on complex issues. And then we see that evidence-based practice is really important in social work, especially around legislation and designing policies. It also is really important toward funding. So for social workers to understand how to use the research to support when they're looking for funding, and implementing programs for evidence-based practice. We also see that it's, like life is always evolving. And so to have access and know how to use research in practice really helps support ethical practice and current changes practice. So the idea that, the way I practiced 20 years ago, it shifts. And having a connection and a passion to continuously be involved and have access is super important.
Oh, you're not unmuted.
Whoops, sorry, I knew I was going to do that eventually. So one of the things that really stood out to us in these conversations and talking about how important it is for social workers to be able to access research was how much of a barrier traditional scholarly publishing is to research-informed practice, and how little this is actually talked about in the social work profession or between librarians and social workers, social work faculty, or with students. So I'm sure many of the librarians here are familiar with this problem and why traditional scholarly publishing models are problematic. But we really wanted to make this something that was transparent to the students in our classes and the workshops that we were doing. We thought that this was really important. And, you know, I think librarians and libraries work really hard to provide, you know, seamless access to this content while students are enrolled at the university through interlibrary loan and subscription databases and all kinds of things. But that kind of creates a form of information privilege for the students that really distances them from the restrictions that they're going to encounter when they graduate. So making this transparent and making the kind of the business of scholarship transparent to students was a priority in the workshops that we did with them. And as a profession that's dedicated to social justice, we also thought it was important for social work students to be aware of the systemic issues within academia and academic publishing that have supported and enabled racism and injustice. And an essential part of this is the lack of diversity for full-time higher education faculty. And those, of course, are the ones that are doing the research and publishing. And of course, we rely on their labor for the peer review process. So just basically, these are statistics we did share with students that as of fall 2020, nearly 3/4 of full-time faculty in the US were white. That's from the National Center of Education Statistics. Less than 30% of researchers worldwide are women. The majority, of course, of scholarly research articles are published in English. And I think we know that, but knowing the societal implications of that, I think are something that we really need to talk about and consider too, that can contribute to the loss of local knowledge and knowledge sharing among the populations that are being studied. And then there was an interesting article done on the research, on the literature that's available on addiction. They showed that since only 17% of the world's population speaks English, by using English exclusively, nearly exclusively in the scientific literature, that excludes over 80% of the world's population for accessing that research that might support and improve their communities. So this is something I think that that really resonates with social workers. It's a problem I think that they really need to be aware of when they are using research to inform their practice. Knowing about these limitations is important. And we also wanted to use a critical information literacy lens and have students kind of rethink authority. So knowing that research articles really are the primary ways of sharing new research and findings, it's also important to reconsider their ideas about authority. And there was clear overlap here with sections, and this is just pulling out just a sentence or two from each of these, but there was definitely clear overlap between competency for and the authority as constructed and contextual frame from the framework. So we wanted to introduce students to the framework and to encourage them to intentionally seek out information that provides diverse viewpoints and perspectives outside of the scholarly literature.
So in our instructional approach, as Amanda pointed out in the beginning of the presentation, we did choose a class that I was teaching, a seminar course with students that were in their senior years. This is undergraduate students. All of the students who are currently in internship placement, so they're really beginning to focus that movement away from finishing their education and moving toward their professional experience in the field. Students in the social work program volunteer or intern about 15 hours a week, and our seminar met 2 hours a week, 2 hours every evening, or not every evening, one time a week for 2 hours. And we did design, Amanda and I worked together to design these 3 workshops with an open pedagogy assignment for the class to participate in. The workshops were co-taught. So Amanda came into the class 3 times, and we both co-taught the workshops. They were informed by information literacy, and we focused on the scholarly publishing, open access, and information privilege. That were some of the themes that we highlighted for the students. And we were really trying to help the students connect this connection between the framework and particularly that idea around authority and what literature is, what scholarship is provided that use of authority, and have the students really question what's the best use of knowledge when we're out in the field, and whose voices are being left out.
Yeah, so for workshop number 1, we focused on scholarly publishing, information privilege, and open access. And I just provided a few screenshots from our slides that we did, but we're certainly happy to share those slides if you are interested. If you want to kind of use them to create your own, we're happy to share those. But our learning objectives were for students to reflect on the challenges of engaging in research-informed practice and practice-informed research after graduation, that competency 4. We wanted them to understand what information privilege is and how it impacts social work practice, both for themselves and for the clients that they're serving. Understand efforts to address information privilege through open access, and then apply what they had learned to locate open access research that was related to their internship experiences or professional interests. So we did have, prior to class, we had students watch the documentary Paywall, The Business of Scholarship, and that kind of introduced them to some of the issues with scholarly publishing. And then in class, we provided an overview of the peer review process and the business of libraries and subscription journal access. We talked about information privilege, including examples of how the lack of access to research has negatively affected human welfare. And for that, we actually used an example about the Ebola pandemic that was very relevant and clear indications that had negatively affected society. We asked students to consider how the lack of access might affect the communities they serve. We talked about open access as a potential solution to this, including both publishing in open access journals and the use of repositories. And then there was also a research guide that I created that had links to open access social work journals and other discovery tools that they could use to support their work in finding some of these resources.
So students were instructed to bring their laptops to class when we did have the workshop. And so it was designed in 2 ways. We had these discussion questions. First of all, I want to say, for those of you in the room that haven't watched that Paywall film, especially the social workers that have attended, I really encourage you. Our students were really inspired and motivated and came into the class very energized to lead into this discussion. So we led a discussion, these are the discussion questions here. If current research is locked behind paywalls after graduation, how do we remain committed to research-informed practice and practice-informed research? And then we also asked the students, if social work research is accessible to other researchers, how does this move the profession forward and improve practice? In part of this discussion, we talked about the limited availability of social work journals that are open access. So one of our prominent social work journals, Council of Social Work Education, is actually not open access. So we led a conversation around that. And then students had an opportunity to use the worksheet that Amanda developed, and we would have a workshop where we assisted students in finding open access journals. And then they were completing that workshop to help in the process of their annotation.
Yeah, and the worksheet really guided them and asked them questions about the resource to help evaluate, but also look at research and really evaluate the articles and then reflect on how useful it might be to their peers in the profession. So for workshop 2, we focused on using non-scholarly sources to inform their practice. And our learning objectives included having students understand how information privilege is embedded in scholarly publishing, recognizing its structural issues, so talking about some of those statistics that we shared about the lack of diversity in higher education, and acknowledging the ways in which these issues may hinder diverse ideas and perspectives. And we also introduce students to the ACRL framework, but especially the authority is constructed and contextual frame, and encourage them to challenge the preeminence of scholarly articles as the best source of knowledge in all circumstances. And then we ask them to apply what they've learned to identify missing voices and information sources and locate non-scholarly information sources that were related to their internship experience or professional interests. And we provided some examples of those as well in class.
So the second workshop very similarly ran. We asked students to bring their laptops into the classroom. And then again, we began the classroom with a discussion question. So we began to look at how do we balance concerns about discrimination and lack of representation and structural issues within the scholarly publishing with the knowledge and scholarly articles are also standard ways in which new research is committed. And again, we found that students were really engaged in this conversation and beginning to connect what they were seeing in their internships around how, like what was missing from the scholarly research from workshop 1. So we also challenged, like, how do we challenge these systems and how do we contribute new knowledge, solve problems, and establish your own authority? So this was particularly interesting with the themes of our emphasis in our programs, both working with Indigenous communities and also with rural communities, two voices that are sometimes left out of the scholarly publishing information. So, so that was that. And then again, similar, the students would work independently with our guidance in finding non-scholarly sources and work in a worksheet or on the worksheet, understanding how to annotate and read those sources.
And I just, as an aside, I was really impressed with these students and how engaged they were. I feel like there are a lot of students, kind of the atmosphere on campus, a lot of students are very involved in social justice issues, but I think especially these social workers, they were really kind of fired up about some of these things and really invested in this. So I think it was just the right group of students too at the right time as they were about to embark on their careers. So in our third workshop, we worked on creating the Cal Poly Humboldt Social Work Knowledge Commons. So throughout the workshops, we did try to encourage students to see themselves as knowledge creators. We discussed how the students work for the class and the annotations they were writing could be made open and freely accessible so that they weren't just creating this work for the class, they were creating it for the profession. So we wanted them to have an opportunity to create something potentially useful to them as professionals. So we discussed what this might look like, how it might be organized, what platform to use. We decided to use Google Sites. All students here have Google accounts, and it did seem like the most easy to edit resource or platform for them to use. So in workshop 3, we used an open pedagogy approach to create this commons, social work knowledge commons, to create this website where they added their annotations and stable links to the sources that they had selected. And now it is freely available at the URL, and we can certainly share that afterwards. But all of the contributions here on the site are clearly attributed to the students. So we really wanted to make sure that it was transparent that this was primarily a student created site. There is content here about finding open access journals and finding tools and journals that are important to social work as a resource for them going forward. So most of the content is created by students. And this is just one class of students, so there's not a ton of content there yet, but we are hoping that this will continue to grow and change and evolve as we use it in future classes. But I think the activity itself really enabled them to proactively address some of the challenges and the barriers that we had talked about in both of the previous workshops. And then also create something that they could be proud of, that they could have their name on, and they could share with their colleagues and also access later on once they've graduated.
And you see the themes there. Those are determined by this where the students were placed. So again, this will expand as we go to use different classes and different cohorts. But of the 19 students that were in the class, the students worked with the aging populations, behavioral health, child welfare, adult and juvenile justice. So you can see the themes of what they were looking at, and how we designed that social work knowledge commons was based on their practice experience. So we did create an assessment with the students, looking at the knowledge and that they gained, and also just to gain feedback through a pre and post survey. We designed 15 questions that students answered before they engaged in the first workshop. And many of those questions were around their understanding of open access and how they use scholarship within their practice and throughout their education. And then after the workshop, students were instructed to do the post survey, which had 3 additional questions that we gathered additional information. We had 19 students in the class, and out of the 19, 15 did complete the surveys. Students were notified that it was confidential, we didn't collect their names, and that participation was voluntary. We used an online survey. We used the format, Qualtrics? It was the survey format that we used. And we, students were engaged. It's pretty good standard. If we have 19 students, 15 did complete the pre and post. So it's a pretty good engagement.
Yeah. And then we recoded the results to kind of determine themes in the responses. And this is just a very kind of general overview of some of those responses. But one of the themes that we identified was barriers. Paywalls were already considered a major barrier even prior to graduation. So this was something that students identified right from the start. Several students also pointed to the challenge of finding research on specific populations like Native Americans, single fathers, and older populations. That was a challenge both in finding research, but also in just freely available content, that there was limited information out there. Lack of time came up in both the pre and post surveys from several responses. Even prior to the workshops and introducing the open pedagogy assignment, several students indicated that they would like to see a well-organized and easy to navigate website to locate research that would be beneficial to their practice.
So another interesting theme, most students did feel that their social work education had prepared them to critically evaluate and apply research findings in their future practice. However, we did still see that there was a disconnect between research and practice within the surveys. So some students did, we have some quotes here, but that idea that they saw research as part of their research class, and that was highlighted in their research course, not necessarily throughout the program in other classes. They feel that the instructors were talking about how they apply these articles they were reading to real life practice. And then another student said, just because I read them doesn't mean I can grasp the information that is provided. So we found that theme.
And that's not something we really, explicitly addressed in the classes as far as like actually reading and interpreting the content, but it is something that we might want to consider for future classes, or even integrating that more throughout the program. So most students had a basic understanding of how their access would change after graduation, but they did demonstrate a greater appreciation of those limitations after the workshops. One quote, one student said that, "I'm concerned about the lack of access. I knew it was going to be a challenge, but class has really driven the point home that outside of academia and lacking a fat stack of cash, it's really hard to have access to research that may be essential in doing effective macro and micro social work." We thought that was really powerful.
And so when we asked how prepared they felt to engage in research-informed practice after graduation, most students did say that they were somewhat prepared. And again, we see this theme that even though there's access is limited, I feel well equipped to navigate the available resources to better the lives of the communities I hope to serve. One of the things that was really exciting is that all respondents, so all of our students did say that they would use what they learned in our class in their practice. So that was super exciting. And I have to say too, like there has been a shift in 2022, those social work competencies were updated and to include anti-racist, anti-oppressive. And so moving our class forward to talk about why this is important, it was exciting that our students said, yeah, they learned how to use this in practice around some of those themes.
And then our final slide, we really loved this quote and we thought it was a nice place to end. So one student said, I will take the tools I learned to help others find resources and build networks of professionals. I will be better equipped to act as an advocate, ally, and accomplice when necessary to improve the lives of my clients and the communities as a whole. Recognizing the value of access to research and filling one's quiver with arrows of truth can affect powerful systemic changes, as well as have immediate impact on individuals, families, and groups. So this was, I think, it was a feeling that I think this person articulated really well, but I do think that a lot of the students felt this way, and they felt that the workshops that we did with them were worthwhile and provided them with a more solid footing on finding that research to inform their practice after they graduated.
So we're excited to continue along with this project. We'll be introducing additional cohorts to establish, more resources on that the Knowledge Commons. I think some of the things we will redesign in the courses, I think we spread these workshops out throughout the term. And I think some of the design steps is we're going to kind of consolidate them closer together to keep that excitement up. For many of you, you may know that around April or close to graduation, students may have not been as engaged and as excited as they were in January and February when we introduced the workshops. So we're going to see how that goes. I mean, all of our students did complete the open pedagogy assignment and did contribute to the Knowledge Commons. But there were some prodding for some students in turning in their assignment in the month of April. So there may be a timeline shift. And we also may expand it from the bachelor's program to include more cohorts. So as I said, we have a master's and there's also additional classes like with the bachelor's students. So engaging more students in the project.
All right, well, thank you so much for attending today. And we encourage you to visit the Humboldt Social Work Knowledge Commons and explore that site. And then also we have our contact information on that site as well. So if you'd like to take a look at it. We have an article that is coming out in the spring issue of Communications and Information Literacy. If you'd like to learn more about the project, that will be shared there as well. Any questions?
Amazing, thank you. We had one question in the chat earlier. They said, I'm curious about the disconnect between research and practice. Did students talk about how they observed research being used or not in their internship? And did their workplaces support research-informed practice?
Yeah, I think that we see it in several ways. That when the students talk about time, we see that practicing social workers do run into when do they have time to do the research? Paywalls did come up that they don't have access because stuff is behind a paywall after they leave their university. So sometimes even our supervisors will use our students to access information. They'll say, can you get this article from your library? Amanda, do you remember other themes that came up regarding the gaps?
Well, I did want to mention too that we, in addition to this study and this project that we did, we also did a survey of social work practitioners, including the internship supervisors, and asked them about their access to research and how they use it to inform their practice. So that was kind of a separate kind of but related study. And it was interesting to talk about that. So the results of that study with the students in some of the classes, being able to understand how the people that they were working with as their internship supervisors were using information as they, were well into their careers. So that was interesting, and hopefully we'll be able to share the results of that study as well. But I do think it's a challenge. I think it's an ongoing challenge as far as access and and of course using students to get access to research. That's interesting too. So but hopefully, and one of the goals of this too was to encourage more conversations about social work researchers publishing in open access journals or using institutional repositories to share their research, so that this becomes more of a common practice within the field of social work.
And also encouraging social workers to see themselves as scholars, in that idea of encouraging research from the practitioner instead of the university. So we did conversations around, like, for rural social work, as I said, there's a lot of research that tends to be urban centered in social work. And so the value of social work practitioners seeing the importance that they can contribute to scholarship to advance knowledge and their voices within the profession.
Amazing, thank you. Someone else was curious. They said, I was wondering about the formatting of the workshops themselves. Were they more lecture-based or discussion-based?
I think we would introduce some content and then add a discussion piece and kind of alternate between those things. We did really want to, it was a close cohort of students. They knew each other already. They had worked with each other throughout the program. So discussions were utilized as kind of the primary means of conveying information and sharing information. So it was easier, I think, to do that because they seemed to feel comfortable sharing and opening up and, talking about their particular challenges and what they've seen in the workplace. So it was primarily discussion based.
And I see some of the questions coming in. It was face-to-face. So the assignment, the students did not watch the film. We did not watch that in person. That was an assignment that students watched on their own. And then we came to class face-to-face. And I think that we also structured it like there was lecture, discussion, and then workshop. So it was just like designed in that scaffold of a way. So students participated in completing the assignment in class.
Excellent. Someone asked, just asking if you could share out your PowerPoints with us. It was inspiring to me to think of ways I can introduce collaboration with my social work faculty.
And I would just comment on the collaboration with librarians and social work faculty is like to push the use of librarians beyond how to do research or use the library, which typically I do have to admit that that's how I used to use librarians. Like, come on in and they'll introduce you to the library resources and how to access articles, but really collaborate with competency 4 and encourage that collaboration around how to use research in practice, and to have discussions around authority. I think it was really well worth it and very engaging.
And I'll just add all materials that are going to be shared will be on the Lilly LibGuide, which I have the link in the chat. We have one more question here. Do you have any suggestions for strategies librarians could use in approaching social work faculty to implement something like this? Do you think social work faculty in other institutions will be interested in offering something similar?
I think so. I think, yeah. Oh, sorry, I was going to say,
go ahead.
The new faculty orientation was an excellent opportunity. I think, as a new librarian, new to the university, trying to, look for making those connections and figuring out who might be receptive to talking about things like this and potential projects. I think, that was a really great way to meet. But I think any opportunity to work together and have conversations with faculty about these things, I think it's often that, faculty just don't know what we can do and that what we can offer and what, we'd like, what kind of projects we'd like to collaborate on. So, taking advantage of opportunities to serve on committees or to work with social workers, I think is always helpful. But I think also, looking at those classes that are more research focused and approaching the faculty and talking to them about maybe how you might be able to support competency 4 or any of the other kind of, I think competency 4 provides like the clearest gateway for librarians in terms of that. But I think, talking to them about information literacy, talking about some of those intersections, that companion document, I think is invaluable for those conversations. I think that's really important too. But yeah, just any opportunity to connect and just to show what the library can do and what you're willing to do in terms of collaborating on projects.
Yeah, and I would have to agree. I think introducing that ACRL framework to social work faculty and making a very clear, explicit connection between the social work education competencies, again, pushing that framework of like, the librarians can assist not just with how to use the library, like we can really come in and assist with illustrating how these social work competencies can be demonstrated through assignment in collaboration on campus that can really help practicing social workers within your communities.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Did I miss any from the chat? Oh, something just popped up. I teach research from an evidence-informed practice framework and work with our librarian regularly in teaching the librarianship. I'm excited to incorporate these ideas about information privilege into the EIP process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just also to reiterate, this is social work focused, but I think there's overlap with and there's companion documents that have been created for lots of different disciplines. So I think just this could be applied to other disciplines too, and seeing where information literacy overlaps with various competencies in different fields and and values and things like that.
All right, do we have any more questions? I'll give you everyone a minute.
Well, thank you all for coming. And yeah,
yes,
definitely if you would like more information on, exactly what we covered in classes or in the workshops, or want to explore the knowledge commons, then we encourage you to do that and we'll share the information for doing that.
That sounds perfect. And thank you so much for presenting. I absolutely loved it. And I know everyone else did.
Great. Well, have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
All right. Amanda and Debbie, thank you so much. This was absolutely fantastic.
Super fun.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Cassandra, for all